The leather-bound diary lay open on Marcus Chen's mahogany desk, its pages yellowed and worn from constant use. He hadn't meant to read it. CEOs of Fortune, 500 companies, didn't have time for such things. But the words had caught his eye. When his assistant brought in the lost item from the cleaning crew, now 3 hours later, with tears streaming down his face, he stared at the last line written in shaky handwriting. "If I don't wake up tomorrow, at least I tried to make someone smile today." Marcus's hands trembled as he reached for his phone. He had to find her. He had to find the woman who wrote these words before it was too late. It had started as an ordinary Tuesday morning. Emma Rodriguez clocked in at 5 a.m., just as she had every day for the past 2 years. At 24, she was invisible, one of dozens of night janitors who cleaned the towering glass building of Chen Industries while the important people slept. She pushed her cart through the empty hallways, her reflection ghostly in the darkened windows that overlooked the city. Emma didn't mind being invisible. In fact, she preferred it. It meant no one asked questions. No one noticed the dark circles under her eyes or the way she sometimes had to steady herself against the wall when the dizzy spells hit. No one knew about the medical bills stuffed in her kitchen drawer, or the diagnosis she couldn't afford to treat properly because her insurance had lapsed when she'd had to cut back to part-time at her second job. But Emma had a secret weapon against the darkness threatening to consume her: kindness. Every night, she left little notes of encouragement on the desks she cleaned. "You're doing amazing," on a desk buried in paperwork. "Don't forget to smile today," near a family photo. "The world is better with you in it," beside someone's coffee mug. She never signed them. She never expected anything in return. These tiny acts of anonymous kindness were her way of fighting back against the unfairness of life. And she wrote about it all in her diary, the only friend who knew her whole truth. That Tuesday morning, Emma had felt worse than usual. The medication she'd been rationing had run out 3 days ago. Her vision had blurred twice while cleaning the executive floor, and she'd had to sit down in the CEO's private bathroom, pressing her forehead against the cool marble until the world stopped spinning. She'd pulled out her diary. She always carried it with her, and written that final line, a whisper of resignation mixed with defiance. Then she'd finished her shift and gone home to her studio apartment, not realizing the diary had slipped from her cart. Marcus had never paid attention to the cleaning staff before. Why would he? He was too busy making million-dollar decisions, attending board meetings, and maintaining the corporate empire his grandfather had built. At 42, he was successful, wealthy, and profoundly lonely, though he'd never admit it. His divorce had been finalized 2 years ago. His children were away at boarding school. His days were filled with people, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd had a real conversation with anyone. When his assistant Jennifer had brought him the diary that afternoon, he'd been annoyed. "Just put it in lost and found," he'd said without looking up from his computer. "Sir, I think you should look at this," Jennifer had insisted, something in her voice making him pause. "There's a name inside, Emma Rodriguez. She works night shift. But Mr. Chen, the entries. I started reading and I think she might be in trouble." That's how Marcus found himself reading the diary of a woman he'd never met. The early entries were hopeful. Emma writing about her dreams of becoming a teacher, about her mother back in El Salvador whom she was trying to bring to the States, about the joy she found in small moments. Then came the diagnosis, stage 3 kidney disease. The entries grew darker as she described choosing between medication and rent, between treatment and food, between giving up and holding on for just one more day. But threaded through the despair was something extraordinary. Emma wrote about the notes she left for strangers. She described imagining the smiles on their faces when they found her messages. She wrote about a young analyst she'd seen crying at his desk late one night, how she'd left him a day, note saying, "Tomorrow will be better," along with a chocolate bar she'd bought with her last $5. Days later, she'd found a note on her cleaning cart. "Thank you, whoever you are. You saved my life that night." Marcus read about the single mother in accounting whose family photo Emma dusted carefully every night, leaving notes like, "Your kids are lucky to have you." He read about the intern who worked until midnight every day, whom Emma encouraged with messages like, "Hard work pays off. You've got this." He read dozens of entries about dozens of people Emma had touched without them ever knowing her name. And then came that last line, written just hours ago. If I don't wake up tomorrow, at least I tried to make someone smile today. Marcus's heart hammered in his chest. He grabbed his phone and called security. I need an address for Emma Rodriguez. Night cleaning staff, now. Then he called his driver. Then he called his personal physician. He didn't have a plan exactly, but he knew with crystalline clarity that he had to do something. The address led him to a rundown building in a part of the city he'd never visited. He took the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor, his driver and doctor close behind. He pounded on the door marked 3F. No answer. He pounded again. Emma Rodriguez! Please, if you're in there! A neighbor poked her head out. She came home this morning, but I haven't heard anything since. That's not like her. She usually leaves for her other job around 3. Marcus didn't hesitate. Call 911, he told his driver. Then he threw his shoulder against the door. It took 3 tries, but the old lock finally gave way. Emma was on the floor of her tiny bathroom, unconscious but breathing. The paramedics arrived 6 minutes later. Marcus rode with her to the hospital, her diary clutched in his hands, this time with his own tears staining the pages. 3 days later, Emma woke up in a private room at Mount Sinai Hospital. The first thing she saw was a wall of flowers. The second was a man in an expensive suit sitting in the chair beside her bed, reading her diary. That's private, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Marcus looked up, and Emma was startled to see his eyes were red-rimmed. I know, he said. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry I read it. I'm Marcus Chen. I own the building where you work. Where you worked? Emma's heart sank. You're firing me. No, Marcus said firmly. I'm hiring you full-time with benefits. Real benefits. The kind that will cover everything you need. He leaned forward. But more than that, I want you to head a new initiative I'm creating. The Emma Rodriguez Kindness Program. We're going to encourage every employee in my company to do what you've been doing, random acts of kindness, anonymous encouragement, being human to each other. Emma tried to process this, but she was still groggy. I don't understand. Marcus opened her diary to a page he'd marked. You wrote here, I wonder if the notes I leave make any difference. I wonder if anyone even notices. But I have to believe that kindness matters, even if no one knows where it comes from. Emma, I found 17 people in my company who saved your notes. 17 people who told me your words kept them going on their darkest days. One of them is my head of marketing. She's been sober for 6 months, and she credits one of your notes with giving her the strength to go to her first AA meeting. Tears rolled down Emma's cheeks. I didn't know. That's what made it so powerful. You expected nothing. You gave everything you had, even when you had almost nothing. Marcus's voice cracked. You were dying. Emma, you were rationing medication and skipping meals and working yourself into the ground, and you were still leaving chocolate bars and encouraging notes for strangers. Do you have any idea how extraordinary that is? I just wanted to help, Emma whispered. You did. You helped me too. Marcus touched the diary gently. I've been sleepwalking through life for 2 years. Going through the motions? I'd forgotten what it means to actually care about people as people. Not just as employees or assets or networking opportunities. Reading your words. Emma, you reminded me what it means to be human. Over the next weeks, as Emma recovered, with full treatment covered by Chen Industries' executive health plan, Marcus was a constant visitor. He brought her books, her favorite foods, and updates about the kindness program. But more than that, he brought himself. They talked for hours about life, loss, dreams, and second chances. Emma learned that Marcus had been one of the people receiving her notes. The one on his desk that said, "You're doing amazing," had been there on the anniversary of his divorce, a day when he'd seriously considered walking away from everything. He'd kept that note in his wallet ever since, though he'd never known who left it. The kindness program launched 3 months later, with Emma at the helm. She trained employees at every level to look for opportunities to lift each other up. The initiative spread to other companies. News outlets picked up the story. But for Emma and Marcus, the real transformation was personal. Marcus used his wealth and connections to bring Emma's mother to the United States. He established a fund to help other employees facing medical hardships. He started eating lunch in the company cafeteria instead of his office, learning the names and stories of people he'd overlooked for years. Emma discovered that her voice, the one she'd only shared with her diary, was worth hearing. She spoke at conferences and schools about the power of small kindnesses. She enrolled in online teaching courses, working toward the dream she'd written about in those early diary entries. 2 years later, on a Tuesday morning, Emma stood in Marcus's office, no longer as a janitor, but as the director of employee wellness, with her own mahogany desk 1 floor down. Marcus handed her a box wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside was her diary, now professionally restored and preserved. But there was something new, hundreds of pages bound behind it. Notes from employees across the company, all addressed to her. Thank you notes, stories of how her kindness had rippled out. Messages of encouragement sent back to the woman who'd encouraged so many. You wrote that if you didn't wake up, at least you'd tried to make someone smile, Marcus said softly. Emma, you did wake up. And you didn't just make people smile. You changed everything. You changed me. Emma hugged the diary to her chest, overwhelmed. In her darkest moment, she'd believed she was invisible, her life insignificant. She'd been so wrong. Every note she'd left, every smile she'd hoped to inspire, every act of kindness she'd given freely, they had all mattered more than she could have imagined. Because that's the thing about kindness. You never know when your light is exactly what someone needs to find, their way out of the darkness. And sometimes, in lifting others up, you save yourself too.